Well, last week we learned how deep injection wells used to dispose of fracking fluids may be causing earthquakes. Now a government watchdog group says seismic activity isn't the only issue. In the fifth installment of my series on hydraulic fracturing, I take you out to the Cuyahoga River in Ohio.
It's hard to believe that this waterway was the site of raging fires in the 1960s, sparked from an oil slick due to decades of industrial waste pollution. It also ignited an environmental movement and eventually led to the river's cleanup. More than 4 decades have gone by and the serenity of the Cuyahoga River still seems intact. But sitting not far from the shoreline are at least a dozen of Ohio's more than 200 deep injection wells used in the fracking process.
The wells are designed in a way, and then we oversee the construction of them so that there are multiple layers of cement and steel to isolate any of the injectate from any of the USDW, the underground source of drinking water.
The wells are used for disposing of brine fluids related to oil and gas drilling, including fracking water. But not everyone is as confident as the state that drinking water will remain safe. In a recent report, a congressional watchdog group criticized an EPA program that is supposed to protect underground water from injection well fluids. The General Accounting Office says that the program needs improvement. That sentiment is shared by local activists.
Accidents, incidents, and spills. Groundwater migration is a concern, but it's a longer-term concern. Currently, the biggest problem is people who are not conforming to the standards and people who are deliberately violating the law, holding tanks that are not in good repair.
And the big secret is exactly what fluids are going down into those wells. Oil and gas companies consider that information proprietary, so governments and nearby residents are left in the dark as to what chemicals are being injected underground.
Well, the wastewaters, they're doing different things. The initial flowback, that which comes back, the spent fluids that they did to hydrofracking, generally they take that water, and a lot of companies, the bigger companies, will process that water and reuse it. The smaller companies are sort of stuck because they don't have the facilities, so they just generally have to dispose of that water someplace else. Now the big thing with hydraulic fracturing is for every, let's say 100,000 gallons they inject, in the Marcellus, it's about 10 to 15%, so 10,000 gallons comes back.
The companies reuse that flowback water, but eventually it must also be disposed of underground. And since much of the geology prevents Pennsylvania and West Virginia from creating deep injection wells, Ohio has become the dumping ground for most of the wastewater along the Marcellus Shale formation.
And portions of the segment were made possible thanks to a fellowship from the Institute for Journalism and Natural Resources. Be sure to tune in to the last segment of my series next week when I take a look at the sheer quantity of water used in fracking.